Panther organ opened up with the top taken off. You have this bar here which sort of indicates what everything is doing, and these different boards, it's preamplifier, bass divider, filter board, 8-inch filters, and all the different sound modules. These are just oscillator boards creating a tone for each note. The whole keypad tilts up, and underneath the keypad you can see the speakers, 2 of them, and the power section. And the problem is most likely with these big caps here in the amplifier and the power amplifier circuit, but they're very hard to get to. I'm trying to find a way of lifting the whole keypad, but then we'll have to desolder some of the connections, and it's quite frustrating to see the problem and not be able to touch it or do anything. But I'm gonna fire it up first, and we're gonna listen to the noise, and especially to the noise of the capacitors. Something is cooking inside. One of the capacitors is leaking out electrolytic fluid. I can hear it bubbling, but I cannot see it. I don't know. Well, I think the best way to get to the power section is to remove the 2 screws holding the whole key chassis down, the metal thing there. Working on these bolts here won't allow you to pick up the keypad and lift it from the piano at all. 2 screws here, same here. They screw in from the back, flathead, thin Italian screws. So although I've been able to lift the keypad, you will not be able to lift it enough to get to the power section unless you unsolder these ground points on either side. These on the right side, it's connected to the speaker, ground for the speaker, and on the other side it's for the power circuit ground. Okay, we need to desolder the pilot light as well. We'll do this board first. It's important to make a good map or pictures of how the wiring was done and where all the wires go. We know how to put it back, but we'll have to remove most of the wiring to take the board out. And I'm like thinking that the problem is not this big cap, but rather this small one over here, looking even worse. Really looks exploded, but we'll have a look in a minute when we get the board out. Okay, I desoldered most of the connections here, and We'll have to deconstruct it the way it was constructed, so I think these wires for the transistors are best detached so you can lift up the board and then reattach them afterwards. I think that's what was done originally. It would be much harder to get these wires on the board soldered back. These are open connections to solder to. So let's go on. I tried to clean the board somewhat because there was all this fluid, and it's still not gone. It's very hard to get off. I tried some acetone, but I should just bathe this thing completely into acetone, and we'll clean it. I will check for continuity between the different traces. If that's not a problem, we'll leave it like this and start replacing the capacitors. This is the main offender, and you can see the fluid has dripped all the way down the board. But looking at the other caps, there really isn't one that is not bad. They all seem to be losing fluid. So let's start replacing them. I have to check this one, this big one, because it may be completely exploded on the underside, but I don't think so. Okay, the board is completely recapped now. Okay, all the capacitors, electrolytics at least, on this board are changed. So put the screws back in, connect the transistors, and then we'll have another board to do. Okay, the second board is done as well. All electrolytics replaced, and reconnected all the wires. Think it's okay like this. And now I'm checking the speakers because I thought like one of the speakers wasn't working, but they both work anyways. Okay, this is the big moment. Got the power cord plugged in. We'll have to turn the organ on. Video setup. Yes, camera's running. So that, oh, watch it. The AC wiring for the pilot light. Do you really need that? We don't need that, I suppose. But I could just solder it back first. Outside, Stadler and Wolfdorf are going at it again. Maybe you can hear them. But it's starting to rain, because then there's some hope that these old fuckers will fuck off. Anyways, so here we go. Plug in, maybe? Where's the plug? Nice two-prong. So we concluded that power transformer is probably dead. At least there's a problem with the 24-volt winding, which goes to the rectifier, this little fella here, and the 10 volts winding, which is rectified here, is okay. I can see like 14 volts over here, but nothing coming in from these black and blue wires. So next step will be to desolder these two leads and measure them directly on the leads, and to pray to God that the culprit is the rectifier. But I have like a bad feeling after hearing the cooking noise. Okay, let's check the AC voltage on this winding. Sorry about the dishwasher bubbling in the background, but it's not transformer yet this time. I hooked up my Fluke, still like 250 milliamps dangling in the transformer on this winding, but let's see what we have if we turn it on now without being connected to the rectifier. Fucking knobs. 4 volts. Maybe way out of my league with this organ, but still I'm gonna get it to work because I already discovered that this wire very much looks like a signal wire, so I'm supposing this is the amplifier and this is the signal coming from the preamplifier board and from the sound modules. And if I tap into this and turn my little champy up to almost max, I could get like just on the bass notes. Even the vibrato works, but this just... So we'll have to look into this, but I think cutting out the amplifier, the solid state amplifier, and the built-in little speakers would be a plus. Right now I'm still using the standard, the stock power transformer. I isolated the winding that was fucked up, and guess what? The power transformer is no longer getting hot. So it would be an idea to keep on using this. That will be very handy. And add another preamplifier or a preamp or a pedal, and at least we got some sounds now. So now that the levels are not really up to scratch even with a little tube amp, it's time to look at the preamplifier board. And thank God it just slides out. I'll take off this protector bar. And maybe also the bass divider has an issue, if only the bass keys work. But let's look at the preamplifier first. Well, here it is, and you can see how much electrolytic fluid has spread onto the board as well, and even some of the plastic coating has come off. I cleaned the board with acetone as good as I could. Of course, you can't get all the sticky stuff off, but I checked the continuity of all the traces and they're all okay. A-okay. So, time to switch the electrolytics on this one, because you see it's got a tipple. But would this be the reason of the noise and part of the circuit not working? I don't think so, but they need replacement anyway, or replacing. They need replace. Put the amplifier, the preamplifier board back again, and guess what? Okay, let's take out the other boards and inspect those other capacitors as well, because These are the capacitors that are from the input stages of the filters. It's going into the filters, and I thought, well, they're probably okay, but I changed out the first few, and as you can see, they're really doubled in value, so that's a bad sign for a capacitor. So I'm gonna, used to be 2500 nanofarads or 2.5 microfarads. It's almost double. It's not, we got 6% loss. So okay, I'm tuning up the organ, which is done by using these trim pots, and in order to raise the tone you'll have to turn it left. In order to lower the tone you have to turn them right. And as you can see, I wanted to take this footage before I break all the seals. Most of the pots have been sealed with wax to keep them in place. I had to break the seal on the other ones just to tune them because they were a little bit flat. But best to turn up all the sounds, get a nice tone going and tune like that. Let's try and see how it goes. Probably the old lady who owned the organ before never used it in a band context, probably. So it doesn't matter if you're tuned to 440 or not. But it's going to be used in a band, so it better be in tune. For all of the boards that run on minus 10 volts, it's the lower pin that carries the power and the minus 10 volts. And you should measure there whether you have the appropriate 10 volts, minus 10 volts, because this machine was biased at minus 14. But now I've got it like perfectly dialed in. So it's turned on. Let's turn on my ampy, plug it in. Here's another point that's maybe confusing at first, is if you put it on the Bourdown setting, the gray bass keys function as a monophonic bass keyboard. You cannot play chords with it at all. If you want to do that, you'll have to put it to the 16-inch bass setting. And the more settings you activate here, the louder the sound gets. Vibrato depth. And speed.